To manage, you have to measure. That's simple as that. You need scorecards, report cards to actually create actions out to what you have to repair. So like we start off with the cybersecurity rating system. It's a simple report card from outside. It's not perfect, but it certainly highlights, where your patching cadence is not, and some very high level things that you can attack. And then of course, all the data that's created by all these logs, that has to be actually assessed. I mean, without machine learning, and looking at the false positive, looking at the patterns. And I think the whole idea around really measuring everything so that you can create a reaction or an action around it, it's impossible to do in today's world without some form of AI or machine learning. And and buying the right tools that have this and allow you as a CIO to look at a scorecard, look at a report card, and start to assess what you have to do and how you have to dig deeper, and what else you need. And then let's not forget also, with the power of SaaS, which we all leverage, become SaaS using shadow ITs in SaaS now. And we've done a really good job of cross-pollinating digital skills into other departments using SaaS apps. But those skills also create adjunct products that people all of a sudden start connecting to. And you have to be able to see what SaaS you're connecting to and what's allowed and what's not allowed, and start blocking anything that isn't contractually tied to you and anything that hasn't been reviewed from a security posture perspective as well.
I would suggest we're also looking at KRIs, so key risk indicators, a little bit different than scorecards that aren't measuring absolutes, but might give us an indicator on where we're heading. So some indicators that you might think of, we're thinking about, are indicators that might expose threat and vulnerability management. How many exceptions do you have to your security practices? Another indicator we might consider is the level of awareness and education. We spoke about phishing as an example, the phishing simulation results, and just getting an understanding of where organizations are and where those tough and complex messages might still be getting through. In building on that, and we spoke about this a bit earlier, is adding AI and machine learning to give our employees a little bit of an edge and bolstering that human factor. So an example there that we are deploying AI and ML, John spoke about it in logs, is looking for that abnormal activity. What patterns might we detect using AI and ML that are valid at first blush, but perhaps have some unusual patterns in them that might set off a flag that we might want to investigate further. So I think it's the combination of both of these. We shouldn't have a false sense of security by using AI and ML, but the combination of preparing our employees to be tough targets and monitoring for abnormal activity makes for a more resilient landscape.
Really tackling this challenge is a collaboration. Our resilience is dependent on a number of extended relationships to make this happen. And those relationships are our vendors, to basically ensure that we are partnering with the right vendors that will help us with our employees and whatever other third-party relationships, be it our customers. I think our resilience is a function of tackling all of those relationships and partnering with the right degree of relationships to help us in hardening our resilience going, because it isn't a one-time thing. And I think that collaboration extends to understanding that data is probably one of our biggest opportunities to defend ourselves against what's coming or what we don't know is coming, because the threat landscape is just getting worse, and it's not going away. So I think what we've done internally, so our data science team sits outside of technology, and certainly that relationship with our cyber team is certainly something that we are focusing on, because we understand that the resilience, that the posture, that the hardening is something that we have to do at that level in order to continue to educate our partners, like our relationships, in order to defend on the future and what we don't know. I think the accountability of this rests with all of our relationships, so that it's not really one person being accountable. It's the board, it's the employees, it's our vendors, our relationships that will contribute to our resilience.
Bringing humans and AI together is really the best path forward. The faster and more effectively a company can detect and block the attack, or look at it from an overall perspective, the more they'll be able to protect the business. The only way a company can be successful in this is if they start bringing data science in the mix. First, lots of companies are looking at this the wrong way. They try to use data scientists to solve the adversary problem, and then they try to use cyber engineers to solve the data science problem. However, for the best results, they need to be working together. Second, if we're taking a step back, there really are two problems that most companies face. One, they get too many false positives, or two, they don't get any alerts, so they have no visibility or idea on what's going on. So you can tune configurations that can help, but without data science, like I think John mentioned this earlier, you'll really never get that high precision and high recall that you need to improve that effectiveness and efficacy. So high precision really means that there'll be more true positives than false positives, and high recall means that the algorithm will return most of the relevant results. So what you want to do is combine that data science and security so your detections have high precision and high recall. And lastly, to be effective, you have to understand and really minimize those false negatives. A great example of this would be within cloud account takeovers, but I'm going to get more specific around kind of long cycle attacks. In a scenario where there's a long cycle attack, there's generally a set of weak signals spread out over days or weeks. They're commonly used as attackers resell initial access and take their time to explore an environment to find those crown jewels. So over the course of an attack there's going to be millions and millions of events that are so disjointed for any human to find. So it's critical to have that data science piece with a high signal to noise ratio. So some of the things that companies need to be looking at when they're thinking about machine learning is looking for multiple data sources. So it's not just looking at the endpoint, it's just not looking at the network, but endpoint, network, and cloud as an overall perspective. Multivariate machine learning. So looking at multiple features in the algorithm versus just single variable that a lot of companies use out there. Another one is an environment, making sure that it's tuned based on your environment, not just every company's environment, such as like an EDR would be tuned based on everyone's environment instead of getting more focused. And then having a human loop. So having your threat hunters, your security analysts looking at this and then relabeling that machine learning back to that.
I kind of think about it like Swiss cheese. Any single piece of Swiss cheese has so many holes in it, it might as well be invisible. But as we layer on all the layers of protection, pretty soon you can't see through the block of Swiss cheese anymore. As I look to the future, really what I'm looking for is how do I reduce an attack surface to the smallest possible attack surface I can without impacting my users so much they can't get their job done. And at the same time, where do I add that AI and automation? Right? Kind of to Daniel's point, there is no possible way you can look at everything. And I'm never going to be staffed to have the correct number of people to be able to handle it, right? So I have to figure out where and how do I add the right data sources feeding into the right machine learning algorithms to really kind of bubble the cream up to the top and get my threat hunters staring at that sort of thing. And I'm a huge fan of outsourcing, especially when it comes to something like this. No matter what I do, my company is going to make water heaters and air conditioners. I'm not going to make security products. So I'm a big fan of outsourcing this to companies that have 100 times the SOC engineers that I should have, who are actively looking at this and really kind of aggregating it down to their tool sets. But I like those kind of ecosystems of partnerships, ecosystems of capabilities, and I look kind of externally in addition to the machines to help bring those capabilities into my organization.
Cybersecurity is actually led by our board member. One of our board members chairs it, and it's so important to our company that without having a board member actually driving it, IT will not be able to make this. This is not an IT problem to solve. So as such, we have looked at it, in terms of what Howard was saying, break it down to actually say what we're going to do with our data diversity that we have in place. So we have started with looking at like open data policies. What are the things that we need to look at it? What we are actually trying to protect? We are also, just like Howard said, very strong proponent of outsourcing. So we will be outsourced what we don't have the capabilities inside, but we will at least manage the roadmap and the pursuit of the model essentially, and what we want to have from outsourcer. So that's the model we've been looking at it, but it's always come back to the data. For us, we are a data-driven company. it just makes sense to have a cybersecurity roadmap in our case. So, and the way we do it, we use it as an action plan. That's why it's driven by the board. And whether it's an IT action plan, whether it's a management action plan, whether it's other type of organizational action plan, is within our cybersecurity roadmap.
Howard, I really like what you said about partnerships, leveraging partnerships. We even as a vendor, I think a lot about specialization. We don't want to be in the business of building or managing commodity tools. We want to leverage them, but we want to leverage their expertise. Mostly, I think as leaders, it really does come back to people. Do you have the right people? Do they have the right specialization? Are you leveraging partnerships for specialization? And most importantly, are you measuring and prioritizing so that you're helping them manage their energy, and you're not trying to boil the ocean, but you're focusing on addressing what really matters, the material risks, the business, and frankly everything else is secondary. And then you're letting them go home and have a work-life balance so that they've got the energy to come back and be creative and problem solve the next day.